When we come to the export or international trade, then again more or less the same story. If you put together import and export, again, European Union is again the #1 in the world. For member states, the main benefits of EU membership, I mean, for instance, for small countries, like those who joined in the later stage, I mean, to have free access to 500 million middle-class purchase capacity people, I mean, it means that whatever you produce, if you have a competitive product, you are free to sell it to the market that is 500 million people. You don't have to find market somewhere far from your place. Practically, you are part of that. Freedom of mobility of people, capital, goods and services. It's a basic foundation of the European Union. This is something that puts dynamic and economic vibrability of European Union. Finally, for member states, particularly those who are on, let's say, on the poor base, it's availability of the huge amount of European Union funds and financial support. Later on, I will show you some slides with more precise data, who benefit more, who less. And finally, I think that everybody would agree that all countries in Europe, through the structural cooperation in all fields, became better, either in economy or finance, in policy, justice system, science, research, and new technologies. I mean, Horizon 2020 is the new financial plan for science and research cooperation in Europe. It's based on the premises of 90 billion euros to encourage, to empower innovative capacity of European Union. And finally, what we just said, free trade agreements and other preferential trade agreements with other countries. But what I think is crucial, at least for the countries from Central Eastern Europe, from the Balkan area, is that EU membership prospect is probably the strongest possible drive that push political, economic, social, judicial, or any other reforms and practically help the very complex process of transition. If we put just a couple of them, adoption of European Union legal system, acquis communautaire, the whole process itself practically helped the candidate country to encourage, to put herself as a functioning democracy, to develop market economy, certainly to make better governance, to impose the rule of law, to set the measures to fight corruption that in many countries, unfortunately, is like a social cancer. Customer protection standards in European Union are better than anywhere else in the world because of cooperation of all those countries there. And finally, environment standards are far more higher. Actually, I think that we are all aware how important it is to face and challenge the global issues. We can't do it alone, not a single country alone. I mean, all those challenges go beyond the national state, and the only way to face them properly is really by cooperation. At the moment, what we have as current members are dark blue. We have candidate countries, as you can see here, and certainly now it's the point of the topic of discussion today to say a few words more about particularly this area that is practically knocking at the door, and we all, I think, at least in Croatia, would like to see them joining the club. 10 countries are in line in the area that, let's call it Southeast Europe. Bulgaria, Romania, and Croatia already finished negotiations. They joined the European Union, and memberships was in force since 2007 for Bulgaria, Romania, and 2013 for Croatia. But let's see the others. The Turkey applied in 1987. In 1987, they started negotiation at the same time as Croatia. But it's simply a different issue, because Croatia was kind of cosmetic change for Europe. It's nothing ridiculously serious what happened in the European Union. But Turkey is the country of 60, 70 million people. I mean, it's somehow with the different lenses. Finally, when we see how long it takes from start to negotiation to the membership day, it's approximately 8 years. Croatia had a quite long process. If we put a finger on a couple of countries that just started, for instance, Montenegro. Montenegro started in 2012. They managed to open 24 chapters. I mean, the whole EU legal system is distributed to the 30 few chapters, economic things, legal things, environment, common foreign security policy, and they already closed 2 of them. It means that it's still a long way to go. In the case of Serbia, they opened 4 chapters. At the moment, they didn't close any. Macedonia is still waiting to start negotiation. The same with Albania, the same with Kosovo. Kosovo is still not member, candidate country. It means that still we hope to see all those countries on the way, well on the track, and particularly Croatia, Romania, Bulgaria, we know the process. We have first-hand experience of the complexity of that process, and we are very happy, all 3 of us, plus certainly other member states, to help others to make necessary reforms. In more graphical sense, it means you can see that the process itself is quite complicated. At the moment, those countries unfortunately face quite high level of unemployment. This is not the beneficial view from the European Commission. Certainly, one of the criteria would be really to help them in economic sense to put unemployment down. Because you can imagine if you have such a high unemployment, with the day 1 of the membership, probably many would simply leave, going to some other state. And this is not philosophy of European Union. I mean, philosophy is to create conditions to stay where you are, but certainly with freedom of mobility. Talking about the population size, Serbia is the bigger one with more than 7 million people. The rest of the countries are smaller. But if you see, the trade partners of all of them are mainly European Union states or European Union single market. I mean, they're really institutionally linked in economic sense with European Union. Usually we think that EU enlargement is costly process, and I remember when Croatia was knocking at the door and I had the privilege to be one of negotiators for the number of chapters. From very first-hand experience, I met the number of complaints that it's costly for European Union to enlarge either Croatia or any other state. But let's see what happened really in the all cycles of enlargement. Let's put the finger primarily on the GDP per capita change. This is the orange or light brown, orange color. In 1973, when UK, you remember Ireland, Sweden joined the European Union, practically, even then, the GDP per capita dropped down. In every single case of enlargement, the GDP per capita dropped down, except when we had the Nordic enlargement in 1995 with Finland, Austria and Sweden, when the GDP per capita slightly rise up because all 3 of them were highly developed states. But in all other cycles, we faced the drop down. In the Big Bang, as you can see, it's almost 8% drop down. This is the case of Croatia, relatively cosmetic change in comparison with others. But the question, what would happen when potential other candidate countries are coming in? How much it would cost European Union? And following the same methodology, we have GDP per capita for those countries. I mean, Iceland at the moment has frozen and withdrawn. But in the case if they, hypothetically speaking, join, as you can see, only the area would increase. The rest would more or less the same. But Iceland is economically speaking at a high level, certainly not any burden for European Union. But the same with almost all other countries. Turkey is issue because of the big country. But even in the case of Turkey, the GDP per capita will drop almost exactly as the big bank countries dropped down the GDP per capita when they joined in. It means, as a kind of conclusion for the cost, we can't say about a huge amount of money that practically are on the burden of the... And this is exactly what I would like to share with you. This is the article and graph published in Der Spiegel, German magazine in 2004. And it's very indicative when we're talking about the money to help someone in the process of transition. On the top graph, you can see the red buttons line. You can see how much the Western part of the Germany has invested in the eastern part of the Germany after unification. Practically on annual basis, it was almost 100 billion euros. 100 billion euros every year. But let's see what happened with the GDP. How it affected the growth, economic growth. In the first few years, practically it was somehow quite bigger growth. But then it reduced to nothing, to zero. Despite the $100 billion per year invested in the eastern part of Germany after unification. It shows that certainly it's not only about the money. There are many, many other things that the process of transition has to be put. It's a very complex mosaic. And from that perspective, if we turn back to what we've shown here or here, we are certainly not talking about the hundreds of billion euros per year.